Hello, I'm Sven, and with our next Keyfactor community video, we're going to discuss certificate revocation lists, also known as CRLs, and how can we pull those from EJBCA. So we'll start out and hop over to admin web here first. There's a few different ways to obtain a CRL from EJBCA. One way is we could go over to the CA structure and CRLs from the admin web and do get CRL here to download it. Another option would be going to the RA web, and we could get the CRL from over here. Well, that's great if you're managing this, but what about if you want to have the end user get that from the certificate? Well, which URL would you use there? Well, what we would end up doing is going to set that either in the CA settings over here and providing a URL in the CA defined one. So in this case, we're saying this would be hosted on an external server, or we could have a URL rewrite in here with Apache or Nginx. It would translate it back to a location in EJBCA. So it kind of depends on which path you want to go. You could certainly pull the CRL down and host it on another web server, or you could also use an external VA or a VA instance of EJBCA, setting it up as an external VA and importing the CRLs there to host and pull. So then where would you pull it from there? Well, when you actually click on this button, generate here, it gives you this URL that goes through the public web, and it gives you the long DN name. Clicking this and using this one is not a good idea if you're going to have any volume of traffic obtaining the CRL. Why? Because with this link here, it's going to do a database lookup every time to pull the CRL, and it can get very taxing on the database then by using this URL. The better way actually is to reference the URL over on the CRL cache page. So when you pull it from here using one of the URLs for either the iHash or skid hash, this is going to take the latest CRL and just cache it, that it won't have to do a database lookup. And this is highly recommended way of pulling the CRL if you want to obtain it from EJBCA and not host it on an external web server. So what you can do is just copy the link like this, and then we could go back over to the CA setting here and paste that guy in, and then we would just change this to either obviously take that out, and then we could make this a different server name if we want to. So that way, if we ever wanted to move this off of the CA node to the external VA, we could route that. So we could just call it. So that would be the best way to get that. Now, when you do use this in the Ansible playbooks we have on GitHub, in the Keyfactor GitHub, we actually have examples of doing URL rewrites. So you could do a pretty name that we had before. So if we cancel and go back in, where you could do a name like this and have that actually do a URL rewrite so it would access it from this. And that way you could still have the nice pretty names here without having that other one, and still get the speed and benefit of having EJBCA host the CRLs and not have to worry about pulling those over to another server. The other thing to mention, as well as we did in the OCSP video, is that if you wanted to override that location per cert profile, you can do that as well in here by just coming down to the CA part and then unchecking this so you could actually set this value. But again, I recommend leaving that set and setting it on the CA so you don't have to manage these on every profile. And that wraps up our tutorial on configuring CRLs for access and what's the best way. It's definitely the best way to access from the hash part here, and then putting that URL into the CA defined settings, and then you could use a URL rewrite in front if you wanted a pretty URL. Otherwise, you can just use the link and remove the S so it's all over HTTP and you're ready to go. And what's great too is when you import that CA cert over to an external validation authority, it's going to have that same hash. So bringing that cert with a CRL over to the external VA will work the same, that everything lines up to just bring that data over and be able to host OCSP and CRLs in an external instance that didn't have your CA in it. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Otherwise, Stop over at the Keyfactor GitHub in the EJBCA community discussions and start a discussion if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.